After you get your essentials for the home gym, you start looking at machines, and one of the machines you're likely gonna look at first is a combo hack squat leg press. The problem is they take up a lot of space, they're very expensive. Well, we have this. This is the Force USA leg press hack squat combo, their compact version. We've reviewed other ones. One of them is Body Solid. There's also other companies like Titan and PowerTech, but this has some features that none of the others do, and they're not just gimmicks, they're actually really good. And there's one feature, which I'll show you a little bit later in the video, that honestly is one of my favorite pieces of any for this type of movement. Let's get into the review. Well, something broke. Force USA is not gonna like this. Hey guys, this is Coop from Garage Gym Reviews. Today we're reviewing the Force USA leg press hack squat compact version. This thing, as you can see, is designed kinda to be compact. I say that in the fact that really a lot of these, they're compact a lot in comparison to like their bigger brothers that are the hack squat leg press combos where you basically flip-flop sides. We've got quite a few that we've reviewed. This one is really, they call them a hack squat / leg press. I think they're more akin, a better name for them is a leg sled, because they're kind of in a hack squat formation, but then you can do some other things like leg presses with them. And this one actually has a feature that really I haven't seen any of the others have that allows another movement that's actually really good. Let's get into the overall dimensions, because if you're looking at one of these, honestly, I'd say you only really want a compact version and a multi-use version if you're limited on space. If you're not limited on space, just go with the individual units. The individual units are almost always better, but for 99% of you, including myself, the space that it takes up actually matters a lot. And this thing is actually well designed in the space that it's taking up. First off, the depth is 65 inches. If you compare that to many others on the market, we've reviewed Bolt Fitness, Titan Fitness. I've reviewed some really high-end, expensive versions. This is more akin, a little bit longer than what you'd see from, say, a Body Solid, which is their leg sled. They call it a compact leg press. It's gonna be more shallow than what you'd find from, say, their bigger brother, the Force USA, which their bigger one, which they call the Ultimate 45-degree leg press hack squat, is 89 inches deep, so quite a bit deeper. So you're basically looking at a car for a lot of those. This one is quite a bit more shallow. Now, honestly, the depth, at least in my gym layout, depends on how you're laying out equipment, but the depth is less of an importance. It's the width, because I like to pack machines next to each other. The other thing you have to think about, this one is 52 inches wide, but you also have to leave some space on each side to get in and out of the machine, but also to put the plates on. So yes, it's not as wide as their bigger units, many of the bigger units that are out there, but it's still not, I mean, they call it compact, but it's still not like crazy compact. Honestly, if you're thinking of like something that's really compact, a design that they need to take, I tried one of these at FIBO. It's from Gym 80. They have their PureCraft line. Basically, it loads the plates on the back. So if I think a cool design implementation, if a company wants to follow it, is instead of putting the plates on the side, you put basically a weight horn on the back. If you can figure it out, this would be kind of hard to do it with, but then it loads from the back and doesn't take up any other space on the sides. That being said, one thing that Force USA did really well here that a lot of companies overlook is you've got all this excess space on the sides. Don't make some puny little platform. In fact, the Body Solid one that we reviewed is so small. This thing is monstrous. I mean, look at that platform. Just look at it. Would you look at it?
Just look at that. There, come on, look at it. Would you look at that?
So the overall platform is 31 inches by 27.5 inches. It is big. I actually really like that because it allows you to have more variety when you're using it, allows you to train really narrow stance, no problem, and you can do narrow stance, feet all the way to the back, which I really like that. Basically, it hits the quads really well. You do this with leg presses. I do this often. Basically, you unlock, and then you keep them really tight, and instead of trying to keep your heels on the ground, you basically come forward with them. Kind of like what you would do with a sissy squat, where you're basically leaning back. It mimics that, so you're getting just a ton of load on your quads. It allows you to do that, but then if you really want to, say you're a powerlifter or something, you can get really wide. And you can get really far, like you can get really high up here. It's gonna limit some of your ROM, but you can get really wide, really far up. Basically, this is gonna allow you, anybody, I mean, I think they say up to like 6'4" or so is what fits on the back pad, basically get use out of the platform. But they fixed one of my biggest problems with competing units. One of those is Body Solid. Sorry, Body Solid keeps taking shots, but that's one we recently reviewed. One of my biggest problems with it was it had a fixed platform. This one not only has a massive platform that has a really nice, I call it dragon scale powder coat, but it's basically like a really textured powder coat that's very tough, similar to what you'd find with Rhino lining. It's just really tough, but also grips. It's not diamond plate, but I actually like this better than diamond plate, but it just grips really well, but it also adjusts. So you see down below, they have these knurled pop pins. All of them are knurled, which is really cool. One thing I'd say, Force USA, I love the implementation of the knurling. Throw the knurling on the handles, that would be sick too. But this allows you to basically unscrew it, pop it out, and then adjust it. And it has a ton of adjustments. So you can go all the way like really high, depending on your dorsiflexion or the movement that you're doing, all the way to just really, I mean, you wouldn't really use it like that, but you could if you wanted to. Then to the sled. The sled itself is at a 30-degree angle. What you'll find with most combo units, most hack squats and leg press you're used to using, they're gonna be 45 degrees. Anybody with an elementary understanding of gravity,
The fourth grade science question is
gonna understand basically a 30-degree is more horizontal, which essentially means gravity's not gonna be putting as much force on the weight, which means it's gonna be lighter, which also means it's going to be more of a quote unquote plate eater. I would not use the term plate eater with this, but because it's 30 degrees, because the sled is 38 pounds and not super heavy, you're gonna have to use more plates than what you would if this was 45 degrees. Now this has a max capacity of 660 pounds. The sled itself is 38 pounds. Let's say you weigh 200 pounds. That's gonna give you about a limit of 422 pounds on the weight horns before you really max it out. I think for most home gym owners, that is gonna be more than enough. 30 degrees has positives and negatives. Let me give you an example. I would say the best hack squat currently on the market of all time that also takes up as much of a car and costs as much of a car is the Atlantis Hack Squat Pro. It's incredible. One reason that it's so good, it's also 30 degrees. Now that one can hold thousands and thousands. I mean, it can hold as much of a car too, if we're still using that analogy. I mean, it can just hold as much weight as you'd ever want to lift. But the 30 degrees is nice because it's not as steep of an angle and therefore does not put as much pressure, at least in my experience, on my knees. You're gonna probably have to have a plate tree or something somewhere else because there is no storage on the unit, which would be nice as an add-on. Even at like its lowest depth, it's pretty comfortable on the knees, where some of the 45-degree units, they just don't feel quite as good. So there's positives and negatives. Just understand if you got this, you may have to buy some extra plates if all you're using your plates for is your barbell, because it's that 30 degrees. The sled itself, again, to talk about comparables, the Atlantis Hack Squat Pro actually uses a pretty similar system. It's not gonna be quite as smooth as that, but it is smoother than what we find with many of the cheaper bearing systems. I much prefer the thick chromed tubes with the rollers. I think for a budget unit, it just makes more sense. It is easier to maintain. It doesn't matter if there's like grime and stuff on it, which is definitely gonna happen in your home gym. It's just gonna be reliable and last a long time. So I'm actually glad they went with that. This is actually a cheaper implementation than what many bearing options would be if they were a nicer bearing option, not the cheaper ones. But I actually really like what they did with this because it is a pretty smooth unit. Now, they call this a 3-in-1 machine and they say it's the world's only 3-in-1 compact leg press hack squat. And it actually is. It does some things that none others do. Most leg sleds can't do quite as much as this. The thing that most leg sleds can do is this right here, which is simulate a leg press. Basically, you have this pad here, which has the same knurled pop pins as down there. You pull them out, and it can go all the way from flat, which you're like, how do you do that? I'll show you in a moment, all the way up to really tight. But you set it where you want. The sled lock actually unlocks automatically. So if you push up, it's gonna unlock. I like that, but also if you're, a parent that has kids that plays in your home gym, you may have to consider that because if this thing gets pushed up, it automatically unlocks and you're ready to go. So just something to consider. Now, one other thing you could think of for that is they do have safety stops that go all the way down and up. So you may just want to put one in when you're not using it. But for anybody that likes to go full all the way to depth, you're just gonna have to think about that because you're gonna have to take it out. So then you're ready to go, you hold these handles and you can do a leg press, just like you would do with any of the other compact leg sleds. It is different experience than what you would use for a leg press. Obviously, you're completely inverted. It's the opposite motion. That's why I call it a leg sled. It is more like a hack squat. But if you're looking for just like getting direct leg work without you know, fatiguing your lower back and things you do with squats, say you have back problems, this is definitely gonna accomplish that. But really what's interesting with this is the attachment. So you have the leg press option, but one thing that Force USA, the reason they can say we're the world's only, they're really the only ones that have this, is this attachment right here, which is quite smart. This is something they actually added on. Previous, they basically had a unit similar to this. I don't think it had as big of a foot plate, but then they came out with this bad boy, which I was really excited to try. So this attaches on the back using the same knurled pop pins as all the others. It has 4 different adjustment holes, basically allows you to lock it in, get the position you'd like. Then you can adjust this to whatever angle you'd like. You can technically use it flaying all the way back, which when you look at it, it looks like what you would use for a hack squat. The problem is when you use it like that, the depth is not very great. Let me just show you. So I'm reaching probably about 90, but this is not how deep I'd like to go. So one way you can mitigate that is basically by putting this pad further up. So you're shortening your hip angle, which basically prevents you from getting as much depth. Then you could bring this forward or bring it back depending on how you feel. But let me just show you, this is probably about the orientation I would use it. Some just hit there. Well, Force USA is not gonna like this. If you've ever wondered if these are real reviews, now I will say, Force USA, I'm sure would fix this. Send us a replacement. But I mean it when I say like, we give honest, real reviews. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but it is a breaker. Something broke. So this piece, which you can see is just tack welded very cheaply, connects, connects right here. So you can see it. You can see how the weld came off. This connects here, so when you unlock this, this swings down, but this holds it from swinging all the way. That's something that's going to get a lot of use. This really botches I'm very positive on this bad boy. I think it's pretty good. Man, you got to do better. That's a safety issue. If you've ever wondered, this is how we play. Honest reviews. So there we go. But let me just show you how it works. Basically, you'd undo this, the handle, and then you'd let it go, and then that piece would stop it, but now it's just free floating. So when you squat with it like that, see, it's hitting, which isn't great. They'll fix that, at least they definitely should. So maybe I can, just to show you, I'll just hold it. So then you go down. I'm able to get, I would maybe want to go a little bit deeper. Like if I could go just a little bit deeper while having tension, that would probably be ideal. But I'm getting like 95, 90% way there. So if you like to squat ass to grass, which is different for everybody, it's like some people say they squat ass to grass and then you see them squat and you're like, that's kind of suspect.
Because that's what he is. He is so sus.
I squat 500 pounds, NG, no problem. And then you look at him, it's like, I call those sus squats. That's what those are. Now, on the depth issue, another thing I've noticed with this, which I think you could fix pretty easily, I saw somebody online that basically got spacers, 100 millimeter spacers. If you go all the way to depth, the first thing that hits is the plates. That shouldn't happen technically. I think that's something they should fix. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can actually push these out on both sides, come all the way down, and then you've got a little bit more depth. You can see they kind of rub up against there. This is one way you can do it. Okay, so the leg press portion, the hack squat feels really good. Just a note on materials, the vinyl they're using here is just okay. Like it's not world class, it's not awful. I wouldn't call it like a really cheap material, but it's definitely not as nice as what we see from say companies like Rogue Fitness, Rep Fitness. It's just okay. It's somewhat grippy, not crazy. I will say the padding is a little bit softer than I'd like. I think it should be a little bit more dense for something that you're really gonna put a lot of pounding on. It is board backed, it's solid, but just a note on that. Then I do wanna show you a feature that honestly is my favorite on this entire machine, the calf block. Now, if you're like me, you were not blessed with big calves. That's the reason I wear pants so often. I have really small calves. So I'm trying to do more calf work in my research to get the biggest, largest, strongest calves ever. Basically what I found is a straight leg is superior to a bent leg. So something like a seated calf raise is actually not as good as a straight leg. So the gastroc runs behind the knee when it's essentially bent. It's not stretched. It's in a shortened position. Legs are fully lengthened. It's in a lengthened position. It's going to get more work. It's going to be more activated. So this, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to do calf raises. It's an adjustable angled block that goes in and out very easily, doesn't disrupt the machine at all. You're able to keep a straight leg. You can get a ton of depth. It's very smooth. You can load up a ton of weight. You're safe because you can lock in, at least if that bar's working like it's supposed to. I love the calf block of this. So if you got the space and you want a machine just for calves, honestly, this is one of my favorite ways to do calves. I do them on my leg press a lot, but you have to constantly adjust your feed and everything. I mean, this is one of the best ways you can do calf raises. Love this feature. This is very smart, and it's not like it added a ton of cost. Very easily to implement. Now, one thing that does matter with these, especially Force USA, because they try to ship their stuff in as small as package as possible, so they can basically save you on shipping. This does require a lot of assembly, but it doesn't take a long time. So they put on their site about 1.5 hours, took our team about 2 hours, a little bit less than that. So it's not a crazy amount of time, especially when you compare it to many of like the bigger leg press hack squats. So if you don't want to take a whole weekend putting some together, which I understand, this is not going to be that. So to summarize the review, do I recommend it? Generally, yes. If they fix this little mishap, and also like if you've experienced this, let me know in the comments. In fact, if you have any thoughts on these, it's very helpful for me to see. I will say generally my favorite, just like in tier order, the calf block, the hack squat, and then the leg press. So depending on what's most important to you, if like the leg press is most important and all you're gonna do is leg press, then you may just wanna get a leg press. You may not need the extra features of this. This is a little bit more expensive than what you'd find with the like more budget-ended, like a Body Solid or PowerTech. Not that much more expensive when you really factor in how much more steel is in this and how much larger and just more functional it is. So this is actually, I really like this thing. There's some minor tweaks like with the spacers, hitting the platform and just things like that. But generally, I think this is a really well done unit. And Force USA, like they're not just white labeling stuff. There's a lot of companies out there, they're actually just white labeling other companies' stuff. You see this all the time. Force USA, you can tell from this, it's like actually putting some engineering and thought into it. So I think you should reward companies like that because it's actually going to be a better product than others that are out there. So let me know what you think of this in the comments. Is there any other compact leg press hack squat combos you'd like us to review? Let me know in the comments. This has been Coop from Garage Gym Reviews. I'll see you next time. Peace.